So tonight we're gonna do a lot of practical stuff here tonight. Kids, pay attention as close as you can. I'm gonna put you on a pretty simple exercise here to deal with this. I'm mainly talking to adults. So y'all are gonna be a little slow going here. Priorities of work. This is gonna be a concept and a label that you're gonna hear me talk about a lot. Okay, so some of the biggest problems that we have are related to not understanding what priorities of work are. Largely in terms of grips. I can simplify Jiu-Jitsu down to you immensely if you understand one very important thing, that it really truly revolves entirely around grips and advancing grips or retreating grips or removing grips. Okay, that is truly it. If you look at a grappling match, there's really only one thing that can hurt you: the dexterity of the hands. Okay, you can create mismatches every which way else. You can create a mismatch between the feet. You can create mismatches everywhere. Okay, but it's really, really hard to create a mismatch with the hands. When a person has the hands and they have the ability to grab you, they can do a lot of danger. And what I see a lot of times is this insistence and persistence on not understanding when we should be looking at priorities of work. And it's in terms of every single aspect of Jiu-Jitsu. We're going to talk about it specifically tonight in terms of submissions, passing, and setting up guard structures. So one of the hardest things to understand is how and when you're supposed to be paying attention to an opponent's grip. Okay, and we see this a whole lot. Okay, so let's look at it in some simple terms. So if we're in close guard, and this is something that I see happen a whole lot. Okay, so we start talking about priorities of work. Priorities of work is going to be something we have to pay attention to when we're looking at advancing our position. We have to, in the moment, in a very, very split second, have to prioritize everything that's happening to us, okay? And I can tell you that 9 out of 10 times priority number one is gonna be grips. There's very few times that it won't be, okay? In order for him to do something really sound with his closed guard, he's going to have a dominant grip to get that done. In order for me to break the guard or to advance my position, I have to have a dominant grip to get that done as well. So recognizing what is my priority in every single situation, your mind needs to switch a little bit. Not mindlessly grappling, or I'm not necessarily thinking about what technique I need to deal with right now. Okay, I need to bring my knee in, need to push down the leg, I need to go to knee cut, need to pass. All that stuff is really fundamentally great, but it does you very, very little good if you don't even have the grips with the ability to get that done. If he's dominating your grips, the second that you go to sit up and start working on some of this, you get kind of thrown off right out of the gate. Okay, so we have to be able to deal with grips. Likewise, if we're in a submission situation, go ahead and switch, take my back. We have to prioritize everything here as well. So if somebody has my back, we see this a lot as well. Somebody has my back laid down to the side. I see this a lot where he's got one hand, a strangling hand over the shoulder, which the hand that's always over our shoulder is going to be the one that attacks us. And we have a hand down here committed to doing what? We're trying to get this leg out, okay? And we're not recognizing this priority of this threat that's right here, right out of the gates. So what has to happen here is we have to prioritize every single grip that we ever come across. We have to deal with grips, okay? So if I'm messing around down here and this hand gets anywhere close, I have to absolutely positively bail on everything that I'm doing, and I have to now work my defense and start trying to free all this up and lock this up and get myself out of a position where he can now attack me, and now I can start to work back to my mission, whatever my mission might have been at the time. Okay. Same thing can be said for close guard. Now we're talking no-gi. So earlier, Sergio and I were talking about his perspective, the fundamental difference of gi versus no-gi. Everybody feels like, well, gi is that much harder because there's that many more grips. No, there's just more grips. There's not any better option for him to lock you down. It's just the fact that you're being hard-headed and not dealing with the grips that you're getting here, okay? So at a higher level, what you start to see is, if I know what break I want to use right here, I have to understand that he needs a grip to do anything. If he wants to shoot his triangle, he has to control me in some form or fashion, okay? He's got to have my hands. And I see a lot of times what happens is, we get one track, put a hand here, and we put a hand here. Now he double teams my hand. physically double teams my hand, and I go ahead and continue on with my grip breaking strategy. Make sense? Because right here, we don't necessarily perceive this as a threat. And I'm here to tell you that right now, today, you're going to perceive every grip as a threat. Every single grip on your foot, your knee, your hand, you're going to start perceiving that as a threat. And we're going to work to eliminate that and then get into a situation where now we can go ahead and we can start to work. Okay? So there's a point of no return. So what I'm saying here is I may have this here and have to fundamentally like break this grip and get inside and then reset and go now. But once I'm up, he can have that grip. Once I've gotten to a point where I can continue on with my work, it's okay for him to have that grip. But it's not knowing and recognizing when we need to knock these grips off and start to establish what we need over the top of him. Same thing can be said from open guard. You see this a lot as well. Many times, see a person step in here and we get here and then he reaches down and he grabs my leg. Okay. Now if we're talking about priorities here, committing a hand to the leg is not going to be a priority to committing hands to hands. Right? If a hand comes up here and grabs my hand, now we got an issue that we're going to have to work for. Okay, so I always want to try to maintain a topside grip on a hand. You don't necessarily want to be under a hand so much. When I'm standing on top, I like to get a hand and start driving that hand down so that now how many grips is he operating with? One. He's operating with one. Okay? But same thing can be said for the gi. He reaches up and he's grabbing my collar. See, many times we don't even address this and we just continue to go on about our business and we go on about passing simply because we think, well, he may not have my hands, he's up here grabbing my collar, and we just refuse to deal with it. Okay? So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to recognize priorities of work. Your first priority is always going to be hand grips. First priority, relieving that. If we're in half guard, often you see black belts. This is a stalling point here. I can't tell you how many matches I've been in with other black belts where literally this is all it looks like. Now somebody tell me why this is happening here. Okay, because it's that important to establish this grip right here before we start to progress any more from here. Okay, because it doesn't matter what I do here. If he grabs my sleeves or grabs my hands or grabs whatever he wants and I decide, yeah, you know what, I want to go into a knee cut and I don't address this, the second I do, look what just happened. Well, I didn't address the grip. So priority number one in the first drill that we're going to do is always going to be grips, stripping the grips. Okay, and this is an inverse concept as well. So we'll flipping this over to guard. Say I'm closed. Okay, I understand his entire goal is to do what to my guard right now? Break it open. The problem with that is he has a very difficult time with that if I control his hands. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen kids doing this. Or adults. Stand up and open guard. All you kids, get over here where you can see. I see this a lot. What's the problem here? Who has priority of grip? Him. Because my two priorities for me are to establish my grip. Okay? And now he's given his grip. I didn't work to break it at all. So where this starts, priority one is what we're talking about right now. Regardless of what your offensive capabilities are, regardless of what your system is down here, it starts with a dominant grip. Okay? So if I'm a sweeper, I like to sweep. I want to hit that up sweep. I have got to dominate the grips to a point where I can now come up and start to work into this. Likewise for him, this sweep never would have happened if he had not allowed what?
His hands off the...
If he had not allowed that to happen, that sweep never would have happened. Same can be said, I'm going to scroll through some of these. Same can be said for triangle chokes. Likewise, that triangle choke never would have happened had he addressed the hand threat, right? Same can be said right here. That submission never would have happened if this grip had not been allowed to happen. Okay? And it's that quick. That's how quick we can defend these. So, switch, got to close guard upside down. So right now, we're going to talk about the passer first, because that seems to be one of the problems that we have, especially for kids. Posture is everything. Priorities of work starts with grips. We're just talking about grips. Now I'm going to get into posture. Wherever my hands go, when a hand meets it, that has to be stripped, dealt with, and removed. Notice I went to a top side grip. I'm not bottom side here because effectively what's he doing with my hand if I go bottom side? He's pinning it. So the minute that a grip comes in and grabs me, my priority is to establish a dominant grip off of that and strip that grip. If he comes over the top, now I start trying to dominate the grip. Once I've got a dominant grip, meaning I'm controlling him, now I'm going to explode into my sequence, whatever that sequence may be. If he's not allowed to grab me or control my hands or control my sleeves or control my collar, he can't effectively do anything. It's very difficult for him. Now, his point earlier, and I'm not calling you out, just understand.
No, go for it.
Gi versus no gi, right? Who's got a talk? Tell me a talk real quick, just really quick. His point was gi is that much more restrictive. It's not any more restrictive. It's just understanding there are more points of control that have to become a priority for you. So if I'm here, he grabs sleeve. What's the priority right now?
To break it.
This is the priority. And if you sit here and you ignore it, you get what you have coming. Priorities of work all the time. So you can start hearing me shout that out. Kids, priorities of work. If this happens, this has got to be dealt with right now. Now, what happens? He works up here to this hand and comes to the elbow. This one. Yeah. It started here. It's advancing here. What's the next place it's going to hit?
Shoulder.
Okay? Now what happens? He turns on an arm bar, and I just watched 3 progressions, which were priorities of work, and failed to meet any single one of them, and that's what got me in the situation that I'm in. It's what got me in the predicament I have. Okay? So if I would have dealt with it and been attentive to my priorities of work right off the gate and dealt with this would not have happened next. Same can be said for the collar. Now, I'm not saying that you're not ever going to get caught in grips. It's going to happen. Sometimes you won't be able to strip them. We have to be good at stripping the grips. Or we have to know a safe location to get to. So when this happens and I recognize that this is one of my priorities, I have to now start working to strip this grip out and remove this. If he gets this grip and climbs up to the second grip, I'm going to have to start working to control this. Or understand that if he's committed both hands to one, what should I probably do to his? Commit both hands to one. Because now we have essentially the same thing going on. We're 50-50 at best. He's not just free to use both hands to control my one. I can neutralize that by going 2-on-1 as well, and then I can start to do what? Strip my grip. Okay? Same for random collar comes up and grabs a hold of you. We sometimes have issues stripping collar grips. Okay? Often we find we have issues stripping collar grips. 2-on-1, we can still start to work at breaking this down somewhat. Or we can come in, grab, and strip our collar away, keep his grips somewhat neutral. Open guard is the same thing. Understanding as a passer, dominant grips go from hands to elbows to shoulder to head. That's the progression of control that leads them to have submissions, sweeps, all these other things. As a guard player, control goes from foot to what? To hip. Foot, knee, hip. The points of control, feet, knees, hips, hands, elbows, shoulders, head. Those are the points of control. We're talking in terms of no-gi, 2 hands, 2 elbows, 2 shoulders, 1 head. We're talking in terms of gi, now we have 2 hands, 2 sleeves, here, anywhere on here. Belt, okay? It's not any different, it's just more points of contact that you have to be cognizant of and dealing with before you move your position. If I come in here and he grabs a collar grip and a foot grip, somebody tell me what the immediate priority is right now.
Break the collar.
Does anybody argue that the grip on the collar is priority 1? What if he grabs a sleeve in a collar? What's the priority? Collar. Okay? Collar's priority because it's preventing me from doing what? Posturing up. I don't ever want my posture to be broken. So if I get into a situation like this, I'm going to have to reach up and start breaking this posture grip. Now what's my next priority? What is it? Sleeve. Now I can start to advance my grip and I can start to work. Right? I just told you points of control. You just saw me do something. I just told you points of control in the feet are what? What are they? So the minute I stripped this grip, he had collar, he had sleeve. To get my what? What did I just do back? Then I went here, and you saw me go where? To the what? Very simple sequence that you should see completely different now. All I did was work in priorities of work. I started doing my job in my own priorities of work. Was there any submission on at any given time? No. Had the submission have come in at any point in time, anywhere, my priority immediately defaults to what? Defend the submission. I don't care if it means you give up position. I don't care what it means. That's your ultimate priority, the submission. You can't deal with anything else except the submission. Okay? So now, since we understand a couple concepts, the job here is to pass. Okay? The job here is to sweep or submit. Passing, we should be really trying to pass, to break and pass one way, and that's how. Standing. We should break standing. Being down here gives multiple attempts. Okay, we'll talk about this here in just a second. So understanding now, well, that we don't have the gi, he's just got my sleeve and he's going to have head control. Well, priority 1 is to free my head so I can move my upper body anywhere I need to move. Priority 2 now becomes to clear off what? This. Now I'm dominating 2 grips. So I can go ahead and start my passing sequence. Now I can go into my standard. Our standard for passing has always been high-low, but notice I didn't change it. All I did was I got myself in a position to fix it, to do it. He had head, I broke the head off, stripped my other grip out, went here, controlled the minute he went for this other hand and pinned his hands to his belly. Then I start to come up and then the hand goes to the chest. Then we start to break loose. Now I have another issue here now. So now what's my priority here? I'm standing. Now I'm going to have to deal with this grip because now I'm in my standing position. So now I can start to work in here. If he reaches up and grabs this sleeve, now what do I need to do right now? I got to start working this so that I can advance my position. Okay? I'm constantly removing grips and advancing. So, process, okay? Think about your priorities of work, dominate the grips, strip grips, advance. Strip grips, advance. Strip grips, and advance. I shouldn't see a bunch of this. He doubles down on my grips. Boom, there's a strip. I'm kind of right here and I'm controlling, but I'm just doing what with my body? Just sitting here, okay? Just sitting here. I said deal with the priorities of work, deal with dominant grips, and then advance. Which means here, I need to go ahead and start working to get up. Now I can start to move. Now he has no grips on either my collar or my sleeves. He's just got a leg. If I understand this and go in verse, and I grab this grip here, who should be putting in work dealing with priorities right now? Me or him? Him. He should be stripping grips right now. So he strips grip. Now I get stuck in here. Now I got to deal with what? He's got both ankles. I better deal with this somehow. Now I'm starting to move again. Okay? We're constantly stripping grips and moving. All right? We're going to start in close guard with this little drill. The objective here is pass. Now, you're going to see how much easier it becomes to break and pass if you abide by this concept the whole time. That means don't get stubborn just because you're like this and you're reaching back here and he goes and grabs your grip again. We're going to have to deal with that and start fighting for our grip again. Okay? Notice when I'm doing this, he's opening himself up, trying to remove my grips. There's something from being on top and guard that's very dominant. This top side grip, on top of their hands, they physically have to circle their hands all the way out to try to get rid of this grip. If I stay on top of his hands, I can really do a lot of damage. It's when I put my hands here and I just accept for him to grab me like this and I keep working that I get in trouble. Okay? We're gonna go 2.5 minutes, play with this. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.